I am so happy to have you all back here, and I've told IWF that you are welcome to GPB anytime. You may get sick of coming here, and part of IWF is to go to really cool places to have lunch, but welcome back to GPB. So thank you for coming. Oh, one more thing. If you try to use the sanitizer, we've made it like a Rorschach test or something. If you open it up, you have to take the top off, and you have to take off the cellophane there, so it's hard.
Thank you. So many thanks to Taya. I thought last month was a fabulous program. I was remote and on Zoom. It was just amazing. And today will be as well. We appreciate it. The location is fabulous right off the interstate. And Taya, we just can't thank you enough for all that you've done. Yes, thank you. It's still good morning time, so good morning. And did you know that today is the International Day of the Girl Child? Okay, well, you are the smartest, brightest children that I work with, that I've ever been associated with. And so we celebrate all children, but especially the girl children around the world. And I think today's program will be appropriate for that, because girls have often been underrepresented and have felt the impacts of the lack of equality in terms of quality of living. So we celebrate the girl child today. Welcome to our 2022 annual meeting. I'm going to be brief. You have slides here, but if we can flip very quickly, I want to share with you a few highlights from this past year, and that's going from our last annual meeting to this one. So if we can flip to slide 3, please. Do we have someone in the back flipping? Okay, to the next slide, actually, and one more after that, the 4th slide, right here. I know this is small, but you have this at your tables. You have 2 key slides at your table. One summarizes our one-pager strategic plan in association with our purpose and our global mission. The back of that is a series of highlights over the past fiscal year between annual meetings, and then you have 2 pages of financial summary. So we want to hit everything appropriate under our bylaws, but and you can take those home for further review and questions, but I want to just hit a few highlights today. On this slide, I wanted to emphasize that Global recently changed its mission statement, and that is now to advance women's leadership globally and locally, that's where we come in, and champion equality worldwide. So we had a strategic planning task force that did a refresh over the last year or so. We spent actually several meetings over about 18 months, and we revised our purpose statement to say that we're going to achieve that mission by providing unique opportunities for diverse, distinguished women, leaders, to connect with one another, stimulate growth and impact is a new word there, and elevate all women. So that is our purpose here in Georgia. We do that through the strategic pillars of strong membership, impactful engagement, and a sustainable organization, and we have initiatives toward those goals. So I just want to hit on the next slide, please, a few of the highlights across those pillars. Strong membership. We have 215 members now, and we're about to add over 30 more. That was a 98% retention rate, which is pretty darn good in a period of COVID. So that's all about you. Thank you. 30 new members expected, and I'll show you a list, but we'll just run through that quickly. We'll be welcoming them next month, and you'll be able to meet them, and they'll be joining the class of 2023. And for an exciting change this year, we will have not just 7, which is on this slide, but at least 9 new members from the Savannah area. And I want to thank Amanda Brown Olmsted for leading the charge. Yay. Leading the charge of putting the capital G, Georgia, in our Georgia Forum, because this is the first time that we will have a presence of significance outside the Atlanta area. We've got a lot of folks working from the engagement committee, the membership committee, and the board in determining how we will incorporate that, continue to provide the great diversity of programs and access to this truly statewide organization. So look forward to more to come on that, and thank you, Amanda. It's been fabulous seeing you operate and identify these amazing women. Of our new 30-plus members, 41% are women of color, and 44% are approximately 50 or so or younger. We don't ask for age, but we want to make sure to that sustainable organization purpose that we have young and emerging leaders as part of our group. Our membership survey this year, we only had 40 people respond. So to me, that's a knock. We need to do better on that, and we'll figure out from you why maybe people overlook the survey. But over 75% said that we're meeting expectations, and another 20%, so total of 95% are partially meeting. I think that's pretty good in COVID times as well, but something we're certainly working on from a program and an engagement perspective. Moving to the middle column, we had an average of 57% at programs like this. So that is about 30% of our population, which I found when I was working in the corporate world, with the way that people travel and have calendars, that's a pretty good percentage of a population in terms of getting to normal recurring programs. We then had over 41% at our special events, such as the holiday party and International Women's Day. We had 6 hosts for Dine Around: Amanda, Molly, Salima, Susanna, Nancy, Glenda. I know most of you are out there, if not all. Thank you for hosting Dine Arounds. Our attendance there has dropped off a little bit during COVID. Speaking of dropping off, sorry. I didn't realize that was the side of the stage. And so we want to work on that and figure out how we can get Dine Around scheduled in a way that more of our people can participate, because it has universally been the most exciting event that most people rank in terms of enjoyment in their membership here. 7 members attended the Global Conference in Santiago in May, and we have at least 5 registered as of a week or so ago for Las Vegas in November. The timing moved a little bit to early November, so for those of you who are going, thank you for representing Georgia there, and we look forward to hearing great things from Vegas. They actually added something new this year you may have just seen, which is a day ahead program for aspiring corporate board members. Apparently the global membership had asked for that, and they've added that, and so trying to answer the call in terms of feedback from people and what people would like out of IWF Global. In the engagement group area, we have a new engagement group, and thank you to Glenda Minkin and others who are working on that. In the spring, you'll see opportunities to get more engaged if you desire. That's another area we've had feedback in our surveys that people would like to do things together in the community in addition to with each other, and so there'll be opportunities to do that coming up in 2023. The third column, we had our 3rd successful IWD. Thank you to all of you. It's a large group. Wave your hands. I'm not going to take up too much time having people stand up involved in that planning committee and execution. And we had record fundraising for that event and really appreciate our donors there, so we're able to fund our IWF fellows. Speaking of, we actually had identified 2 potential fellows that were then selected by Global this year, and our budget called for hosting or sponsoring 1, which we will do, and the IWF Global Foundation is actually paying for the 2nd, so this is the first time we'll ever have 2 fellows represented out of the Georgia Forum. Look in your newsletter for details on that. We have 6 new IWF board members I'll introduce in a moment, and we're just in really good sound financial position, primarily because of your donations, your sponsorships, your in-kind sponsorships, such as Taya here today, that allows us to provide a really strong value in programming for a modest level of dues, particularly compared to other forums of our size. Turning to the next page. Financial highlights, again, strong. You can take this home with you. Majority of revenues come from dues or sponsorships. I will give you a heads up that our dues are going to go up a bit this year. You'll be getting invoices in the next month or so. Global has increased its dues, so more than half of the increase is the global increase that has been planned for some time and was deferred for a bit because of COVID. And the rest for just our local operations. But look for those invoices coming out in the next month or so, and let us know if you have any questions. But both our revenues and our expenses are on track. The one big positive projection is that we had accrued for a full fellows sponsorship in this budget, and we have exceeded that from the fundraising of IWD, and so we'll have a benefit from that. So we should end the year with a positive bottom line. And again, many thanks to those of you who have donated and supported both the fellows and our programs. So with that, I want to turn to a couple of more slides later. I'm skipping over our balance sheet, which is strong. It's primarily cash and operating reserves and accrual for fellows and the like. And I want to turn to two more slides later and acknowledge and thank our outgoing board members. At the end of 2022, we have 5 board members who will be rolling off of service. Every one of them has done tremendous things. And if I can ask you to stand, Candy, Mary, Erica, Belinda, and Beverly. Well, I know Belinda was planning to be on remotely, but others of you I saw. Thank you. Each of them have done amazing things, whether it be from programming, the treasurer, past president, leadership, secretary, and operating support that has made a huge difference. So special thanks. Next slide, I want to also confirm that Nancy Zintak has agreed to serve a second term on the board. I saw her name tag back there. Thank you, Nancy. And then a large class of 2023 board members coming in. Again, if you'll stand or wave, whatever you're comfortable doing. Salima, Jill, Gina, Kari, Susan, and Natasha. I saw almost all of you, I think, earlier. Thank you in advance for agreeing to serve. By the way, we don't have to vote today because over 50% of our members did vote online and unanimously has approved this board slate. So thank you for that. The next slide is just letting you know that under our bylaws, we have an executive committee, which is representative of the 4 officers of the board, and also Amy Glennon, who's program chair. The executive committee rarely has to do anything, but when we do, it's usually to make a decision about programming. So we wanted to make sure Amy was there to lead us in that charge next year. Next slide, or the next 2 slides, really. I don't think it's large enough to read, so we'll be getting this out in a newsletter. And then again, you'll be seeing and meeting these people next month. But over 30 new members for the class of 2023. And I want to thank Chloe Barzy and Susanna Chavez. I haven't seen you here, but oh, there you are, Chloe. Thank you for your leadership this year on membership. And the full membership committee, raise your hand. A lot of nominations, a lot of work gone into that. The next slide, the final thing for me is just a reminder about conferences coming up, not just Vegas in November, but next year, Helsinki, Finland in June, and Detroit, Michigan, which is a COVID deferral conference. And since then, Detroit has finished their fabulous new Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and we'll have great venues and other things to offer next fall. So I hope you'll all try to find one of these conferences that you can get to. With that, I will ask Amy to come up and introduce our upcoming programs and also our program for today, which I'm very grateful for and look forward to, and I hope you will eat and enjoy while we're moving to the next phase. Amy?
Thank you. Sure. Let you come off and watch that step. Watch that step. Please do go ahead and eat. I'm going to give you a little bit of heads up on the last 2 big events of our year coming. First, coming in November on the 15th, an evening event. This is our signature event and is really going to be a fantastic evening. We're billing it as essentially a conversation with an icon. We are in special conversation that night with Zernona Clayton Brady, civil rights icon and broadcast ceiling shatterer herself. And our own Callie Bea will be the interviewer of her that evening. So I like to think of it as one of Atlanta's rising, shooting female stars in the executive ranks talking with one of Atlanta's legendary trailblazers. It should be a fabulous event. We thank Bentina Terry for hosting us again at Georgia Power. Again, evening event, November 15th. It's going to be wonderful. And rounding out the year, the holiday party, Sunday, December 4th from 5 to 7 at the Atlanta Botanical Garden. Should be gorgeous. Thank you, Mary Pat Matheson, for that. This is going to be lovely. Please, please come. This is a +1 event, so bring your +1. And now for today. Excited about this. Thank you again, Taya, for hosting us again. This is lovely and such a perfect venue. As program chair, I will tell you that there is something that's really great that happens when two whip-smart people get together on a topic they're very passionate about and put together a program for this group. So today we have Natasha Reed-Rice, one of our own, Vice President for Global DEI for Habitat for Humanity International and minister at All Saints Episcopal Church, and Gail Evans, best-selling author of Play Like a Man, Win Like a Woman, and so many other accomplishments. These two got together on this topic and very excited about where it's going to take us. This is a deep dive and a dig into Atlanta's income inequality issue. As you all know, this is a huge issue for our city, and it has very deep roots in our city. They're going to be joined on stage today. Thank you so much for coming. This is Dominique DeVigny-Sims. She is Senior Vice President at the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute. So we're very happy to have you. Thank you for joining us. And at that, I'm going to welcome Gail up and Natasha, I believe.
Natasha is on her way.
Natasha en route.
In a car accident and had a crisis at the office.
Is she okay?
She's fine.
Okay.
No, she wasn't. I'm sorry. There was an accident.
An accident blocking her but not involving her.
And she should be walking in any minute.
All right.
Texting.
I don't know if that one is on or if you...
Is my mic on? Yes, ma'am. Okay, great. Put this on. So I'll keep watching for Natasha to arrive. Dominique, you had the first question anyway, so we'll start. And as soon as I see her at the door, she'll come join us. So we're going to do something a little different today. One of the things that everybody's commented about is they wanted more of a chance to talk with each other and get to know people. So we're going to do about 25 minutes of conversation, and then we're going to turn it over to all of you to sit and talk with the people at your table. And there are actually 3 questions on a piece of paper on the table. Nobody should look yet. Right, you know, one of the things when you're doing a women's event, you never put the material on the table because women always read it before you present it. Wait. Hello, welcome. Wait. He's following you with the mic. See, timing is perfect. And so then we're going to have you all have a conversation, see if we can come up with some brilliant ideas, maybe something that the whole forum would like to do together. So our topic today, Natasha, welcome, my dear. So we're talking about disparities. I guess that's really one of the best words to use about what we're talking about today, and how that plays in the world of Atlanta, because that's the world that we live in the most. And I thought to myself, as we were beginning this, when I first moved here 60 years ago, I guess, you used to hear all the myths. There were all the Atlanta slogans, you know? Atlanta back in the 60s was always a city too busy to hate. Today, it's the city not too busy to care. Atlanta, the one I always heard was Atlanta's the largest black middle-class city in the world, in the United States, in North America, whatever you were talking about. Atlanta was the city of racial and social justice. Shirley's not here today, but I believe it was Shirley's administration where Atlanta became every day is an opening day. And I was looking historically to see if there were any that I missed, and I found one that I thought for a little humor today, which is not really just Atlanta. Georgia. Without Atlanta, we're Alabama. It's a good one to remember.
Great.
I love that one. But the reality is that Atlanta is the #1 city for income inequality in the United States. If you were born in poverty in Atlanta, your chances of getting out of it in your lifetime are 4%. That's a pretty shocking number. And then, you know, if we intend to leave our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, a city that in any way resembles the myths, we need to understand and solve the issues of income inequality. We need to move from the discussion only about equality to a discussion about equity. So I've asked 2 of our experts in this city to spend a little time talking with us about what are the issues. How do we get beyond this? And then I'm going to ask everybody at their table to solve it. So really easy. So Dominique, I'm going to begin with you. When we talk about, first of all, I'm sorry. I know I had something else I wanted to say. Dominique has a beautiful 7-month-old daughter. The reason she is sitting up here by herself with her mask on is that we in no way want to infect her. So everybody be a little careful. If you have a question afterwards for Dominique, please just be aware that
Hence
she's
the
got
mask.
her, what? Yes,
Hence the mask.
hence the mask, right. So everybody just please be careful. So Dominique, talking about COVID, we're 3 years into COVID. How has the state of play changed for Georgia and Atlanta women since we began?
Thank you. And I'll take off my mask just when I'm speaking so it's not too muffled for everyone. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. I'm really grateful to be here and be part of this conversation today. I appreciate that you were sharing some of those anecdotes about Atlanta because you also shared an article with me recently that ranked Atlanta as the #1 place to live. And I was reflecting on that article a little bit and thinking about, well, what brought me here to Atlanta, back in 2016? And actually, a lot of what I read in the article really resonated with me. There seems to be kind of something for everyone. There's a lot of rich history and culture here. It's a foodie town. There's a music scene, the civil rights movement and history. I have a legacy in history, with my ancestry in the South. So there were a lot of things that really, spoke to me. And being a Black woman, I always felt really comfortable in my own skin here. And I did feel like I saw a lot of Black people that were doing well for themselves. But that dream or that myth of the Black Mecca hasn't been realized for everyone. And while there are opportunities, for people, especially middle and upper income people, poor people have been left out, hence that income inequality that you were naming, Gail. And the pandemic only exacerbated some of these long-seated issues and this long-seated inequality in Atlanta and Georgia. And women of color have been the most impacted and faced the slowest recovery. In Atlanta, roughly 10%, or about 50,000 women, live in poverty. For Black and Latina women, they're twice as likely, so it's about 20%. Georgia women are paid just 80 cents on the dollar compared to white men. For Black women, it's 63 cents, and for Latina women, 55 cents, respectively. And this is across different industries, different levels. This is everything from medical professionals to hospitality. These disparities persist. Men are paid more than women for doing the same jobs. And women of color are overrepresented in jobs that pay low wages due to occupational segregation. And a lot of those jobs are jobs that were hardest hit during the pandemic. So they suffered higher levels of job loss and unemployment and underemployment. Also, a lot of those jobs are gendered and devalued. When we think about, income inequality, industries like education, domestic and care work, home health work, even the service industry are all jobs where women are overrepresented and they're jobs that pay less compared to industries like science, technology, finance, jobs that are dominated by men and that all paid more. So over the course of a career, Black and Latino women lose close to $1 million over a 40-year career due to this wage gap. Women of color faced unequal job loss and recovery throughout the pandemic. So Black and Latina workers remained active job searchers throughout the pandemic, but were kept out of jobs longer and faced higher levels of underemployment. So when you're involuntarily working less than full time or working, below your skill set for a job you're overqualified for. Black women have yet to recover to pre-COVID labor force participation levels, even though historically they've always had the highest labor force participation levels of all women. Today, unemployment remains high for people of color, especially women of color, and Asian and Hispanic women are leading in underemployment, followed by Black men and women. They continue to face biases in hiring, job retention, and pay. When workers are underemployed, aren't being paid living wages, face job losses, face an economic hardship or an economic downturn, they often rely on the safety net to help them meet their needs. The safety net is, a suite of government programs helps people pay for things like housing, utilities, food. It's a system that we all contribute to and should be available to us when we need it. Yet Georgia's safety net system is woefully insufficient to support women who live in poverty. For every 100 families in Georgia that are living in poverty, only 5 receive cash support through the state's cash assistance program, temporary assistance for needy families. And the benefit amount is only $280 a month. It's remained unchanged for the past 30 years. I don't know what family can survive on $280 a month in this economy. So ultimately, the bottom line is that there were economic inequalities that existed, prior to the pandemic that were exacerbated by the pandemic, and women of color have suffered the most.
Wow. So Natasha, talking about women, what role do you see for women from diverse demographics playing and creating a city which is not too busy to love?
I use love quite often, so Gail caught that in our initial notes. I first just personally want to say I apologize for my delay. We had a crisis in the office this morning that I unfortunately could not exit out of. It actually ties into some of this conversation today. So thank you, Dominique, for painting that picture. And I think some of us are like, well, goodness gracious, that was bleak. To answer your question, I say this, I don't say this facetiously. I think in order to become that city, we have to begin with conversations in rooms like this. I was really trying to think about this discussion so that it would be somewhat different for us, meaning that you all have been to many of these panel discussions. I mean, the last 2 years, you've heard endlessly about some of the stats, although these are even more detailed than some of the ones I've been privy to, about the state of the country, kind of the peeling back of the onion and finding out more about the state of Georgia. And as much as I'm hopeful about this election, I just want it to be over because I don't want to hear any more commercials at this point. Right? Like I'm just let's have an honest conversation about how, because I think each of us in this room, we are actors in what our city will become. And that's why the conversation title is Becoming Good Ancestors, because this is not some conceptual idea. Each of us can actually play a role in what the city becomes. So how do we get to the big question? It begins in these conversations. I have a few ideas on that if you want me to start unpacking. Yeah. Okay. So let me start with an interesting story. So I'm in this space of equity, working on bringing in some training, enterprise-wide training for a global organization. One of the platforms we're looking at, and I'm bringing this up for a reason, because I think this is how we have to begin. One of the platforms we've looked at actually comes out of a company based in South Africa. So some people on the team said, hey, you're bringing in a product that's produced in South Africa that focuses on race and equity? That doesn't sound right. And I was like, wow, are we that biased in this country? In South Africa, they've actually had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Right.
They're not perfect. They have a long way to go, but so what I'm bringing that up for is to say, we have to stop being so self-assured in this country that we've got this thing right. And we have to stop being so self-assured in the city of Atlanta that has such an amazing legacy that we know how to do this well. And when we begin with that premise, we then have to take it to the level of where am I complicit in us not being the city that we should be today? It's one thing to say, oh my gosh, it's
currently clear and
2020.
55 degrees in the city. Expect cloudy skies starting tonight. Today
Is that somebody's
will be
phone?
61 degrees and the low will be 36
Maybe when I
degrees.
said city, they thought I said Siri. But anyway, when we think about that, we're like, it's 2020 and this is still happening in the country. You know, we look at it kind of nationally. But what about it's 2022 and this is still happening in Atlanta? And if we accept the fact that we're all actors in what's happening in Atlanta, then maybe we take different ownership about what the steps will be tomorrow. And so now we're in a room of women who are in boardrooms at decision-making tables, right? So we have to think about what does that then translate to when we go back into our offices, when I go back into managing this crisis I've got to manage, right? And so bringing that into those spaces, one of the things I think is important for us to think about in this diverse setting and thinking about all of our points of privilege, because all of us, regardless of our race in this room, the fact that we're in this room means we all have points of privilege. How are we leveraging that? And so hopefully we can unpack that some more.
Great. So Dominique, for some data, what are the major drivers of economic inequality in Georgia?
Yeah, so I think, I was speaking a little bit about this in talking about the disaggregated data, but one of the first things we have to name or talk about is intersectionality. When we talk about income and wealth inequality and who's most impacted, it's women of color, and it's because they face the dual oppressions of racism and sexism. If I were to just say, just look at the data for all women, then it's 10% live in poverty, but it's 20% for Black and Latino women. It's 80 cents on the dollar for, looking at women across the board, but it's 63 cents and 55 cents on the dollar for Black and Latino women. So if we just talk about women broadly and we don't look at that intersection, we're not looking at the full story, and then we can't really come up with the right solutions. I think another thing that we have to acknowledge is that there's a legacy of policies and institutional practices that have brought us to the massive inequality that we see today. It's not individual choices, it's not the way people budget or spend their money, it is policies. And those policies have created and bolstered wealth and opportunity for some, mainly white, cis-hetero, male households with higher incomes, at the expense of others. So, for example, women couldn't get access to business loans without a man's signature until the 80s, or credit without a man's signature until the 70s. Domestic workers were initially excluded from Social Security and fair labor protections. Black families were largely excluded from the benefits of the GI Bill that helped build the American middle class. The list goes on and on. So there's so many policies and practices, including things that are in place today, that continue to exacerbate this inequity. Those are the undergirding issues. I think there's a couple of things that are top of mind today, issues that we're all talking about, like global inflation and the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade and the abortion bans that have ensued as a result. So in thinking about the pandemic, going back to that, another consequence of the pandemic has been global supply chain issues that have led to record inflation, meaning that people cannot afford to pay for basic goods, food, gas, shelter. Yet corporations are actually seeing record profits. So in this current economy, corporations are winning and Georgia's families are losing. We can't continue to pay people poverty wages, right? That's the number one thing. The U.S. Census Bureau recently, looked at data and did some surveying and found that a majority of Black and Latinx households find the recent rises of inflation very stressful, and over half of Georgia households as well, very stressed by these rise in prices. Thinking about the abortion bans, regardless of your personal beliefs about abortion, we have to understand the economic implications of abortion and who's going to be most impacted. And there's a historical context here as well. Black women were initially forced into pregnancy, gestation, and childbirth by their enslavers to grow the labor market. When slavery was abolished, some of the only jobs that Black women could get were care and domestic work to provide support to other people's families and children, but with little support in the way of financial support, benefits, et cetera, to protect and care for their own families and their own children. Today, Georgia's home to more than 2.5 million women of reproductive age. Nearly 2/3 of Georgia moms are primary or co-breadwinners for their household. For Black women, it's 4 and 5, 80%, primary breadwinners for their households. Y'all know it's expensive to raise children, right? I mean, it costs, they estimate that it's about $10,000 to $20,000, and I would argue that it's probably more, especially if you take childcare into account, but $10,000 to $20,000 annually to raise a child in this country. As Gail mentioned, I have, a baby at home, and I know that even in my own experience, as someone with healthcare, someone with a relatively uncomplicated pregnancy and delivery, I still paid more than $3,500 out of pocket for prenatal care, delivery, and postpartum care. And that's not even factoring in other direct costs. That's not talking about food, shelter, clothing, childcare, all the other costs that come along with that. That's with health insurance. So there's a number of women, especially women of color, who are uninsured, and a number of people who don't have access to resources to draw on, whether they want to seek out a safe and legal abortion or care for their families. That's also just taking into consideration that they survive the pregnancy, because Black women are 3 times more likely to die of complications of pregnancy and childbirth. And Georgia has one of the highest rates of maternal mortality in this country. Yes. So there's going to be real life-threatening implications as well as economic implications because of these bans. All birthing people, all families should have the resources that they need to provide a good quality of life for their families. The last I checked, we don't have universal health care. We don't have universal paid leave. We don't have access to childcare that's affordable. We don't have access to housing that's affordable, right? And the list goes on. Our current policies aren't set up to meet the needs of Georgia's women and families. And these are decisions, these are choices, right? Policy choices, different choices could be made. These aren't choices that are about people and people's well-being. These are choices that are about power and control and continuing cycles of violence and oppression. We have to ask ourselves, do our policies and outcomes reflect that we believe everyone should have a good quality of life? And if they don't, then we can't call ourselves the #1 place to live.
So, Natasha, I'm going to make this one tough. This is the charge for the room. How can the women in this room leverage our privilege? You talked about the privilege. How do we leverage it?
So I think, thank you, Dominique. That was just that's some real eye-opening stuff. I just had to pause and kind of absorb some of that, right? Because now as I'm hearing that, what's rising in my mind is, oh my gosh, this mountain is too big. And then on the other side of the mind, and answering your question, Gail, is the way we leverage our privilege is we have to move the mountain one rock at a time.
Yep.
So what rocks do we control? And that's where, so in other words, I think the charge is not to say, if you're not in healthcare, don't go get all read up on what you have to do in healthcare and become the expert overnight. That's not the charge. The charge is the rocks that you are already involved in, the circles of influence that you are already a part of. What can you do differently in those spaces to create, galvanize, strategize towards some change? That's really kind of the charge. And you all will come up with some more specific answers at your table. But I think sometimes they're so, like I'm listening to, I'm like, oh my gosh, the maternal death rate. Okay, what can I do, right? Unless I'm in advocacy. Maybe in advocacy, you start prioritizing your advocacy agenda based upon some of the greatest needs. But if that's not your area, maybe your area is focused on something in the housing space. What can you begin to do in the housing space that begins to open up opportunities, that begins to address issues of economic mobility, that begins to change the narrative so that we don't have such a NIMBY force that keeps us from putting affordable housing options in the city? Right now in the city, the average cost of a starter home is $350,000. Who's able to afford that as a starter home? What can we do if we're in those spaces, right, that begins to shift zoning policies, that begins to create more opportunities for a densification of housing units that still creates the Atlanta we want to see. It's kind of thinking about what's in your bailiwick of control that you can begin to influence and instigate differently. So what we can't do is we can't keep hearing your silence more than your voice. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it is. The silence is too loud. So how do we begin to shift that? We've got to think about tactical strategies, narrative shifting, and where we will put our resources so that we can actually create the city that is not too busy to love and that leverages our positions of privilege.
So Dominique, I'm going to let you finish this and then make everybody really think. I do seriously think that in this room we have enough power, influence, and brains to come up with something that maybe somebody can do that makes a difference. And I am a total believer in it's one little step at a time. And who knows what you can change. But Dominique, how do we begin to level the playing field? Are there great, doable, bold ideas out there?
Thanks, Gail. I just want to comment because I really appreciate what you were saying, Natasha, about like your sphere of influence and kind of your locus of control. And you were saying earlier about, sick of seeing the political ads, which I am also very sick of seeing the political ads. But we are in election season. Yeah. And first, before I say this, I will just say GBPI is a nonpartisan organization. We do not endorse any particular candidate or any particular party. But one thing that's also within our control is talking to our vote, right? Mm-hmm. Making sure that we're educated on the candidates and where they stand, and make sure we're voting aligned with our values, and also talking to the people in our spheres of influence about those issues as well, and the things that matter to us. That's our spouses, our friends, our colleagues, our communities, right? That's actually just as important, if not more important, than volunteering to get out the vote. That's good too. You can do that too, but you don't have to do that. You can just talk to 10 people that you know, right, about here are some policy issues that matter, that we should be paying attention to this election season.
And can I jump in on that point? Because I did forget to say this. And part of that work, because thank you for saying vote. We all know you have to vote in here too, I would hope. But the other part is departisanizing issues that shouldn't be partisanized.
That's right.
That's part of that talking to your circle of influence. Because we've allowed this chatter, it's more than a chatter now, but to really partisanize issues that we as good ancestors should be concerned about, not from a partisan perspective.
That's right.
But on health of community, progress of community, success of community perspective.
That's right. It's not about partisanship, it's about compassion. It's about caring for each other. It's about morality, So thank you. I just wanted to comment on that. Some of the other things I'm seeing or thinking about, and honestly, Gail, I don't know if they're all bold and innovative so much as some of them are common sense. So, here in Georgia, it's raising the minimum wage. We have the lowest state minimum wage in the country at $5.15 an hour. And so even though you have to honor the federal minimum wage of $7.25 in most instances, which is not much better, there are still people who can be paid $5.15 an hour for their labor. And cities and counties don't have any authority to raise the minimum wage because we have preemption in place, which means that the state law supersedes any other law. You can't enforce other laws. So ending preemption is another thing that we can be talking about. But given that, I talked a little bit earlier about the safety net and some of the deficiencies in Georgia's safety net. Since our cash assistance program doesn't meet the needs of families, there are other innovative ways that are helping people to have financial security. Guaranteed income is one of those opportunities. So guaranteed income provides unconditional cash, no strings attached, to families. It provides a floor upon which other income can be layered. It sort of serves as an automatic stabilizer, just meaning that if there is an economic shock or downturn, it helps to support people and keep people afloat. These are, across the country, there are mayors that are getting on board with guaranteed income. There are hundreds of pilots that are happening. Here in Atlanta, there is a pilot that's happening that the Grow Fund is running. It's called In Her Hands. They are supporting 650 Black women in the Old Fourth Ward and other parts of Atlanta, providing $850 a month for 24 months. unconditional, no strings attached cash. So that's different than most safety net programs, which actually are very paternalistic, can be really punitive, and also are insufficient to meet people's needs. Like I said, $280 a month is certainly not enough. So we're seeing some of these, opportunities and pilots pop up in the absence of having the policies that we need in place. So that's something. And then I would be remiss if I didn't talk about healthcare, again, talking about the abortion bans and the overturning of Roe v. Wade. GBPI has always advocated for healthcare for all Georgians, and that's something we'll continue to do. And we do believe that abortion is healthcare. And so one of the things that we've advocated for a long time is for the state to fully expand Medicaid. Again, this is a common sense solution. Thank you, yes. Expand Medicaid. Again, this is something that's on the ballot, so we can be paying attention. But that would cover, over 500,000 Georgians that don't have medical coverage. And right now, I think it's close to 2 million children that rely on Medicaid. So again, you can assume that many more children would also be eligible. So this is not a substitute for abortion care. This will not address the lack of access to abortion in our state, but it will help people to have access to contraceptive care, prenatal care, and other, support that they need for their families. So I think those are just a few things on the policy side that we can be doing.
Wonderful. I would love to keep talking to the two of them all afternoon, but we're going to go ahead and turn to the tables. If there are only a couple of you at the table, come join another group. So that we have at least 6 or 7 people in each group. We put on the table a couple questions to think about. The one I care about the most is the last one about who's got a great idea. I think we could all think, and whether it's at this event or the next time we get together, maybe we've come up with an idea that's nonpartisan, right? That stays within our bylaws, that our chapter could decide we are going to work on together. We got an investment committee out of one meeting, and we have a book club now. Well, maybe we could have a Change Atlanta club. And
when you think of our founders.
Right, especially when you think of our founders, Rosalind Carter and Mrs. King, right? We would be living in the tradition of this organization. So everybody, go for it. And thank you, Dominique and Natasha. Right, we didn't think about that. Thanks. Thanks, that was short. Right. How long did I go? Right. Am I okay? Oh, good, that was just about right. Right. Okay, everybody, another 30 seconds, and then what I'd like to do is we're going to pass the mic around. And I'd like somebody who's not shy, which there's nobody shy in this crowd, to just give us a quick summary of what you talked about. What was the best idea?
Yeah, and then, I saw that. What goes next? And post high school, get into college.
Who's going to talk? Who's going to talk? Okay, everybody, we're going to begin, and we're going to pick on Susan Bell. You can pass it to somebody else.
No. You.
Liz did a good job.
Liz. All right.
Liz, okay.
All right. This is. I am Leona, because she wouldn't take the microphone, but I'm saying all the wise things that Leona and Natasha shared with us. What we talked about was having ideas that are able to be communicated and scaled. And we talked about eviction relief and Talk With Me Baby and resident services for affordable housing and other things that we know work, but they don't end up being scaled because of the fear, and we don't think it's so much physical, racial fear as economic fear. We think that people fear that it's a zero-sum game, and that if there's a policy or an initiative that has money going for it, that it'll take something away from something else. And we talked about how eviction relief actually stabilizes communities. Early brain development saves kids from going to prison as grown-ups. Eviction relief also keeps communities stable. So, and we as a society don't do prevention. We do on the health side, we do end-of-life care. And if we took a fraction of the end-of-life care funding and applied it to prevention, we could make a difference. So what we talked about was taking things one rock at a time, the elephant one bite at a time, but take the proven models that actually work, translate them into language that's economic, so it's understood by policymakers and business investors, and then use those as pilots and then scalable examples of way to bring about change. Again, one rock at a time.
And everybody, do me a favor, introduce yourself. There are actually people who don't know everybody.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lee Zach. I'm the president of Agnes Scott College. And a lot of our discussion was similar with respect to what can we do and how can we make it scalable. One of the things we focused on was IWF and what can we do as an organization. We began by thinking about the international aspect. And as Natasha mentioned, South Africa. Women throughout the world have been change agents. We also can be change agents. So I think we have to take the international part in our name and begin to educate ourselves with respect to how others have been change agents in this area. So education, not a surprise, coming from Agnes Scott College, was a topic at our table. Also, the fact that we need to educate ourselves with respect to the facts. And today, what an amazing job was done with describing the facts. We suggested that IWF do a fact sheet that's distributed to all the members and that we can use as talking points when we talk to our friends as part of it as tangible. We also talked about the continuing to educate and find ways that we can work together. Of course, all of us were proponents. You can always hire someone. You can always, reach out to someone personally. But how can we continue to educate ourselves? And, I made an offer at the table. Agnes Scott College is a vice president for diversity, equity, and inclusion. We also provide a certificate with respect to inclusive leadership. And I'm happy to work with IWF and their programming to be able to provide experts in this area to continue this conversation.
Hello, I'm Ellen Meyer. I'm an executive search consultant with the Association of Governing Boards of Universities and Colleges. At first, we dealt very generally and started to consider about issues of equitability and what it is to be an undivided Atlanta. And it really came down to the 2 points that we've discussed with our speakers and at the tables. Race, all races, and we did feel that was important because of its tie to power, and we couldn't separate it. Why is this a difficult topic? Because, frankly, if you are in power, the idea of equitability means, at a heartfelt level, for many, I give up my power. When I give up my power, basically, you mean where you are, that will happen to me? No way. And I will do anything I can to keep my power. So in the end of this, as we started to bat about various issues as to what can we substantively do and bringing it down to a local level here in Atlanta, we talked about different things, but something really emerged that could affect all of us, no matter our position, and is an incredibly expensive issue today for all, and that's childcare. And Stephanie began thinking about it in our public sector as a role model with, and specifically with the city of Atlanta, and as a model and beginning. And then we began thinking about there too, it was important to have a public-private partnership, such as the Atlanta Women's Foundation, but broader, so because it is, or so that it's not only for the city, but it's community organized. Any comments from the group?
You've done a good job.
Thank you.
All right, I'm Amy Glennon. Hello, everybody. I'm going to ask my table to chime in if I misrepresent or get any of this wrong. Much of our conversation sounded very much like your all's conversation. The idea of how to focus the energies in a different type of conversation arose in ours. How do we bring something that brings the focus to, I think these were Natasha's words, but the health and success of our community, and start talking very locally and specifically about that, not conversations that go into the philosophical that quickly slip into that's socialism or that's communism or that's wealth distribution or something like that. But instead, what are the baselines in our city that frankly we should be embarrassed about and that we ought to do something about? Minimum wage, maternal mortality rates, the income inequality gap, healthcare, education levels. How do we zone in on things that are very specific and very local that we can talk about and perhaps find common ground, which is, let's not talk about this in terms of an enormous concept. Let's talk about this as, here is an area of our city that for many reasons is costing us way more than it should, frankly, because if we address root causes, if we raised some baselines, it would benefit all of us. And how does that conversation start to happen? How do we do that? Is that something that we were very much in favor of an IWF sort of subgroup or something that focuses on that? And how do you find 1, 2, 3 key baselines or issues that we can move those rocks on? Our free-ranging, wide conversation, and really interesting because I think some of the questions about what scares us was a great place to start. And it's a good sort of self-examination, and we came to similar conclusions. The idea that there is, as Sheila said, everybody's concept is there's only one pie and it never gets any bigger. So if one piece goes over there, you're taking away my pie, or a piece of my pie, and that's, we think the fear is primarily economic as well. So interesting to hear that come out of several groups. But I think we would say this table is in favor of seeing if there's something that IWF could rally around, and frankly thought that women are the practical, go-getter, solution-oriented folks who usually get those kinds of things done anyway, so why not take it upon ourselves? Anything else, Tim?
Wow, this is very impressive. I'm Amanda Brown Olmsted, and I own a PR agency that just celebrated 50 years in business. We looked at these first two questions, and we passed over them very quickly. Because think about who we are. Are we afraid to talk about this subject? No, not the members of IWF. Do we find the challenge of equality in our community something that can't be tackled? No, we're a little braver than that. So our conversation went very quickly to a couple of areas where maybe this is something that you all have said as well, that IWF can even think about and learn from. So Jennifer McCoy, and she should be here saying this because it's way over my head. So Risa, you chimed right in. Maybe I'll pass the mic to you. But rank voting. Now, I haven't heard of rank voting, but I'm hearing that it's quite successful in Alaska and in Maine. And it levels the playing field. Isn't that something that we're talking about? So maybe this is something to learn more about. And if you're interested, and hopefully you are, because that's who you are, women of great curiosity, every day, learning something new, then you can go to Better Ballot Georgia. and learn about ranked voting and what it might mean if we get behind this in a bipartisan way, take away those silos that we live in, and maybe come together in that way. And then, Chris, I'm going to pass this to you, because then quickly we got, oh, I'm finished?
Right now, when you finish, but we're not going to Chris. We don't have enough time.
Oh, we don't have enough time, Chris. Well, but you're very smart. Thank you, Gail.
That's all right.
All right. Hello, everybody. Kathy Bremer. What a great conversation. And Gail, thank you. And Dominique and Natasha for just great. We talked about some of the same subjects, but I'm just going to give you the two things that we started talking about housing and so forth, but where we came out were things that could happen, right? So Marriott Marquis unilaterally raised wages to $15 an hour from $11. And Erica's not here to, and they and that had a ripple effect on all the hotels. So that was a huge thing. So any of us that are employers, just start thinking about that. And the other thing is those of us who sit on boards, right? Why don't we call for a pay equity study? And we know what it's going to show, and then get it done. Okay?
Great job. Sorry to push everybody along, Andrew.
Great. Well, I'll spare you all the grandmother conversation, but we got a little distracted. But I mean, that's sort of the point of it. So it really comes around all of the discussion. I think one of our speakers said it very clearly. These are policy choices that are being made by the people we elect to public office. And so early voting starts on Monday. And people, we have the ability to focus on these issues and prioritize them when we choose the people who represent us in Georgia, not just the statewide offices, but also the legislative offices, because the abortion ban, for example, was passed in the House by 3 votes. So, it's very, very important that we vote with these issues at top of mind. And that can make a big difference in whether any of these policies can actually be implemented. Medicaid expansion being first on the list. Andrea Young, I'm the executive director of the ACLU of Georgia, and we're making sure if you show up to vote, they will have to count it.
Well, hello. My name is Priscilla Taylor, and I'm relatively a new member. I moved to Georgia about 4 months ago, and I'm from Palm Beach County, where I was in politics for about 18 to 20 years and own my own business. So things that we talked about here are really relative to what we have always addressed as politicians. But some of the things that we talked about, the first thing was racism. And I think we'll all agree that that does matter as far as what's happening in the discussions that we have been having today. Now, our table was very diverse. We have a pollster. And our pollster, and I would suggest that you get on Beth's mailing list because she emails things out. But she does research as far as what's going on in the communities and how it affects us. So based upon that, her information could be really a baseline of what we want to do to make a change. One of the things that I feel too, and this is me going a little bit off, is getting out of our comfort zone. It's really wonderful that we can sit here and talk about these issues, but let's take it to the community. Take it to the people that we're trying to get to and let them have a conversation and see what we're talking about and what we're trying to do to help them. Now, we also talked about Medicaid expansion. We know that Florida and we know that Georgia, our governors turned it down. Very important subject, something that we need to not have it as a partisanship item, but something that we all can benefit from. We need to work on that. Education is critical. Karen, who also lives in the community, is right now going out and starting an educational outreach, something that we feel that could certainly benefit because we need an educated public so they can understand what's going on. And we need to be global because I think one of the tables mentioned about what's happening in other parts of the world, we're not that different, you know. We have the same problems. We just attack how to solve them differently. So we are all about coming together, working together to make a difference in the community. Whatever we need to do, we're ready.
Thank you. Meredith?
I'm gonna come all the way over here. Okay, can everybody see me? Meredith Evans, director of the Carter Presidential Library Museum. I was blessed to have Sharon Gay, former mayoral candidate, at my table with Blythe. So we were not scared to talk about this, but we did talk about getting overwhelmed. Like when you work on this for a long period of time, you get overwhelmed. So how do you create a group behind you to help take on the work so you can take a break and come back? We talked about having a strong public-private partnership for all of these issues, and we talked a lot about housing. So ditto to everything everybody said, because we talked about that too. We just had the inside scoop.
Okay, thank you, Meredith. I just want to leave everybody with, it's great to sit in this room and discuss it. I know everybody here is an activist in their own world, but we're always looking for more meaning and purpose in IWF. So what I would say to everybody, Susan's not going to like this, but anybody who out of today, or as you're thinking about this in the next few weeks, has an idea of what we might do. We had a lot of nonpartisan ideas out here. These are not things. Ranked choice voting began in a fully Republican state. So it's not something that we could not get behind. Think about is there something we'd like to do together that could make a difference? We would be one pebble in the building of the mountain that might change things for everybody. Thank you all very much.